One of the most prominent issues in North Carolina and American politics has always been energy. How do we produce energy? How do we make it sustainable and affordable for consumers? We sat down with State Senator Natalie Murdock to discuss these very questions and get her take on energy in the state of North Carolina.
Go
All right,
for it.
so before I get to these questions, could I maybe hear about why you wanted to serve on the energy committee, like why
Yeah.
that's a priority, and maybe why our constituency in the Durham area should care about that?
Yeah. So in North Carolina, which actually I think energy should be a standalone committee, but our committee is ag, energy, and environment. So for me, it was also the agriculture aspect. But I see later on you have some questions on there, about methane gas. So there are technologies where all of these issues come together. And from an energy standpoint, for me, the equity piece also really has attracted me to the energy space, whether it be funding to retrofit your home so that it's more efficient and it can lower your energy cost, or having supplements to help reduce the cost of energy, and just energy equity. I mean, it's not optional to say, I'm just not going to have power. And so, with inflation and the cost of so many other things going up, just really concerned about affordability and those that don't have the means, and just that energy burden really, really being a huge part of their budget that is not optional. So the equity piece is also what really brought me to this space. But um, the timing was perfect to get even more exposure, because our big bipartisan energy bill that we'll be talking about later, I think, was introduced in 2021, and I
Right.
came to the Senate in 2020. So, um, came to the Senate in a time where we have to make some real tough decisions about energy right here in North Carolina.
Yeah.
And recently, unfortunately, we've seen some reliability issues with rolling blackouts and all that. The first that I've seen in years. So there's still service issues that we're going to have to address in Durham County.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the legislature. We're just
Hmm.
getting going. Obviously, it's budget year, but pretty
Yes.
soon we'll get, assuming more energy legislation either later this year or next year. What are going to be your priorities, your party's priorities, maybe the whole state, if they have a whole priority? I don't know. Maybe you could enlighten me.
Yes, yes. So from the energy space, definitely, even though I will admit I wasn't able to support HB 951, even though it was a bipartisan bill, I was concerned about the multi-year rate increases. I think that it is well within the right of the Utilities Commission to have the ability to review rates every year. But I do want to protect the good things that are in HB 951, and there are a lot, especially when it comes to phasing out our coal plants over time and retiring them. Looking at those stranded assets, and um, so there were some good things that we got done. So being on the defense of making sure we, preserve the good that we've done is a really big one. Ratepayer savings, looking at more energy efficiency programs would definitely be up there. Government buildings, grid resiliency, just mentioned. One of the most well-known blackouts was right around Christmas. I think it was 2 years ago, and I mean, I had constituents call me Christmas Eve, and they did not have power. And we're right here at
Oh,
the holiday time, so we really are going to have to look at modernizing our grid and looking at resiliency issues, market access, particularly when it comes to solar, getting rid of that 1% cap on rooftop solar and leasing, and replacing and improving more of our community solar programs. Data centers is a big one. So many people need data centers. A lot of people want to help us to build more of them. But here in North Carolina, we're going to really have to have a strategy around how we're going to have more data centers, which also connect to our ability to provide, to keep up with energy demand here in the state.
absolutely. So last session we saw SB 802, which was the first bill in my lifetime that was a pretty big energy bill that passed unanimously in the Senate.
Oh
Everyone
yeah.
liked it. It seemed to be like everyone had a consensus of okay, this is probably a good thing to do now.
Yeah.
Do you think we're going to get any more bills like that, any more steps like that in this term, or is that kind of a one-off incident there?
I'm always optimistic of, I don't know if it will be unanimous support, but back to the reliability and the cost, I do think there will be some sort of energy bill where we'll see this session. A lot of times, particularly in the Senate, we are in the super minority. You are going to see a lot more of bills that may not be the best, but on my side of the aisle, we'll work with the majority to make them better. We may say, hey, can we add a few more provisions that are helpful to low income families, or can we add some provisions for wind, or we'll try to make it better and better for the people of North Carolina. But since we are in the super minority, I think it's going to be hard to have a lot of truly bipartisan legislation, but that is always the goal. And again, we did it in 2021, would be happy to do it again. One that is really exciting out of Virginia, their Utilities Commission did more work around prioritizing what was cost effective, efficient technology, and something that really, really looked at technology, I think would be really exciting here in North Carolina, representing the Research Triangle Park. You go to school right down the street there. We have so many brilliant companies that can help us figure out better ways to deliver energy needs to people here in North
Yeah,
Carolina.
even though the Senate isn't the superminority, I know you guys broke the supermajority for the Republicans in the House. Is that going
Hmm.
to give the senators more influence, or is that legislation going to only come from the House still?
Because we have a lot of folks that are true experts in this issue in the Senate, I think you still could see a Senate bill. The last time around, yes, it did start in the House for various reasons, but it is still possible that a bill will come out of the Senate. And another reason that it could start in the Senate, the Senate is a more conservative body, and so a lot of outside groups now know maybe we need to start in the Senate, because if it makes it out of the Senate, then it can hopefully also make it out of the House, opposed
Right.
to a lot of bills that make it out of the House and then they can't get any traction in the Senate. So since it is big and complex, strategically partners could say, let's start in the Senate, get it done there, and then let the House work with it from there. Because hats off to my colleagues, they really, really worked really hard to negotiate on that energy bill, the HB 951. So I think we could definitely be there again, where it really the Senate can really kind of fine tune some legislation
Ab-
around that.
Absolutely. So the NC Utilities Commission released their 2024 plan report, where it confirmed that we would miss our 70% target of reducing energy-based carbon emissions, uh, and delay that target from 2030 to 2035. Not really a surprise. Everyone kind of knew it was coming. The plan also, though, did greenlight 7 new methane gas power plants, which I guess came as a little bit of a shock to people that were familiar with it. Is that good? How should people that are interested in clean energy read that? And how should people that are interested in affordable energy read that?
Yeah, I think for folks that are interested in affordable energy, a lot of these different forms of, like, take methane gas for an example. There are those who will say it is an attempt to diversify our energy mix and reduce cost, but those that care about the environment and sustainability know it still comes with a cost, and we still have to balance getting prices down, which we all agree on that, with being sustainable, those long term investments. And I think a lot of it also should come down to keeping up with the federal progress we made under the previous administration with IRA. I mean, you had projects that were greenlit all over the nation. A lot of them were in red districts, and I don't want to see them go away. I mean, I've been on calls where folks that have had funding for all sorts of energy projects are now concerned about what's going to happen with that funding. Hopefully, private industry will step up to the plate. But I think those that care about these issues, we do have to make sure we're not going backwards, and we cannot give up on our 2030 deadline. I think some of it was projections showing that we wouldn't hit that goal, but I think that's also a pinch point to say we need to do more. It doesn't mean that we just throw our hands up in the air. We still should say we have to do everything we can to reach that goal. And um and also just with the methane gas piece, there are just so many other options. And when we look at these kind of emerging technologies, they really can become obsolete within 10 years. So it's also concerning for us to put so much money behind some of these emerging technologies that haven't really been, the long term impact hasn't really been considered. And then constituents are left paying for these stranded assets. We've seen it with coal, and we don't need to see that with some of these, when we still haven't scratched the surface, in my opinion, of what we could do with solar and wind, and other cleaner technology options, and even nuclear.
Yeah.
Depending on who you talk to, there's still a lot more we can do with nuclear that's safe.
Absolutely. That is my next question, actually. Your district, Senate District 20, is home to one of North Carolina's four nuclear power plants. It's actually the biggest in the state, the Harris Sharon facility. Duke Energy has stated that they only plan to invest in smaller modular nuclear facilities over the next decade, and even that will lead to a 30% cost in energy increased cost in energy. They predict, although that will be completely clean energy. What steps could the legislature take to make nuclear investment more attractive for Duke while also keeping costs low for consumers?
Yeah, I think there are a number of things. I think some of it is education, myself included. I learned so much about nuclear power through this job, through going through everything we did to get something passed on energy legislation, and also learning how dependent we are. I mean, I think particularly in summer months where people are using a lot of energy, I think upwards of 35% of that is coming from nuclear options. And so there are um, just so many experts in this field. There's a professor out of NC State that comes to mind that has made the rounds here to kind of better educate and let folks know what they could do in the nuclear space. And but also too, there was a lot of pushback on the assumptions of the capacity of these smaller modular reactors. So some of it may be looking at these models and kind of doing a gut check to see how accurate are they? Could we still do more, with what we currently have? But it is premature for a North Carolina legislator to make nuclear investment more attractive when we still can look at battery storage, wind, solar, all these other options. So it really is about that comprehensive mix and getting an increase in percentage usage on other things like wind can help to offset the demand of nuclear and some of the other methods that aren't as clean as we would like them to
Yeah,
be and sustainable.
and for a long time on this kind of environmental movement, there has been pushback to nuclear on a safety concern. Is
Hmm.
the Democratic caucus, at least in North Carolina, kind of past that? Are they at a point now where they say, okay, we have all this research that shows that nuclear is pretty good, and with Republicans now looking like they're very interested in tax subsidies for Duke to build more nuclear, is that a part of consensus where we could see Democrats work with Republicans to get that through?
I think we still have work to do in getting more folks on board when it comes to the safety of nuclear. I think people know it's better than it was, and I mean we've even had folks. I'm actually going to go do a tour this year. Should have already done it to physically see it. For yourself to kind of see what are the mechanisms for safety and what impact can it have on those communities where they're sited. That also is a concern of making sure it's just not having a disparate impact on one community versus another. So I think we still have a way to go on it, but I think that folks that have those safety concerns have a right to have them. And it's really a matter of if you want to reduce your dependency on nuclear, you've got to then replace it with something else. But the safety concerns are valid. Everything we should do should be safe. We don't want to have something bad occur because we weren't following the best management practices.
Absolutely. And on tax subsidies, do you think that's a place where the Democrats could align with Republicans, maybe?
We'll have to see on that one. I think they're definitely probably going to be on the table. And I think with the tax subsidies, it may be one where you don't have complete consensus, but you may have some Democrats that are on board for that,
I see. Okay.
even if it's not complete consensus across the board.
Yeah. So the federal energy regulations allow for kind of regional monopolies. Different companies kind of get the rights to sell energy in different states, according to federal law. In 2024, Duke reported over $4.7 million in state lobbying expenses. That's a lot of money, particularly dumped into a state, which makes them far and away the largest corporate lobbyist here in North Carolina. What does Duke get for all that money? Maybe you could share some insights from being a senator. And do you think their initiatives are driving change? Are they driving lower costs, lower prices? Like where are their interests right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're here in North Carolina and Duke is our energy provider, so I know a lot of folks have concerns around that, but that is our reality. And so as legislators, we really have to work with our premier utility provider, but it doesn't mean that we can't hold them accountable. It doesn't mean that we can't say that we have concerns around how they're managed and regulated. We absolutely do, but we also have a duty to make sure that we are working with them on a regular basis, voicing our concerns, letting them know when they can do better, and showing examples in other states as we've done to say, we like this model that we see in this state. Why don't we do more of that here? And really, really pushing them when it comes to emerging technologies, and also supporting those that are struggling to just keep up with their monthly energy bills and costs with more programs, and utilizing the leverage they have federally as well. When it comes to energy bills, really concerned about the sunset of federal programs that also will help to reduce and lower costs. So, with having such a big presence, we can also kind of look at it in a different way to say, help us to move federal policy as well, in addition to the state level, since they're such a huge player when it comes to being a huge utility
Do you
in
think
this space.
do you think the federal government could open up energy to other companies? Are you interested in maybe seeing the federal government say, okay, let's see if two or three companies could compete in North Carolina and try to drive prices down? Is that something that you would be interested in?
I think in North Carolina, it would be interesting to see that happen anytime soon. I mean, I know it's come up a lot, but change takes time. So we'll have to see if we can make progress on it. But it definitely is something that from constituents and various groups bring to my attention
And
regularly.
final question here.
Hmm.
Suppose that your party's in the majority and you control your energy caucus, and Duke comes to you and says, hey, we're going to raise energy prices by 50%. What can you do? Like, because they have the monopoly, right? So could you say to them no and they just cut power? Like where is your leverage there? What can the state do?
Since we do still have a utilities commission, there are other things we could do in North Carolina through the utilities commission. Unfortunately, something that a lot of folks, it was under the radar. There was legislation that changed the composition of the utilities commission, and so a basic step one thing I would do is kind of restoring the freedom of the governor to make those appointments, and making sure we have folks not just in industry, but folks that are on the right side, what I believe on the right side of a lot of these energy discussions, to make sure you have different voices at the table. And the utilities commission actually does have more power than folks know, and there is still a lot that they can do on the regulatory side. And I think it would be more than state. I think federally concerned about regulations being rolled back. So I think there's federal and state policy, in addition to working with utility commission folks to um, still make sure the state is still, a partner, with Duke Energy, so that we can provide that, not only a feedback, but checks and balances and guardrails.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for all your time.
Thank you.
Yeah,
But no, great questions. This is really impressive. So thank you. That's
I
why I had to
appreciate
ask how you're interested in this topic. But it's, hey, again, you cannot, the average person, you need energy. So
and
you
the thing
gotta
you
gotta
would be
talk about it.
shocked with how many students are interested in this. I would say energy, even over the environment. People, it's energy. It's energy,
Wow.
it's housing, it's a lot of education too.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's really interesting to see. We hope you enjoyed the episode. We'd like to give our thanks to State Senator Natalie Murdock for giving us just a little bit of her time to discuss this very important issue. The podcast is directed by Spencer Bluth. Our producer is Stanley Tirtara Harja. Our event manager is Colton Hankins. Our photographer is Kyle Sundquist. Our social media manager is Zain Abdelbeki. Elizabeth Godwin is our staff sponsor.